Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video. Before we start, I would like to ask you that if you like the content that is being shared with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And now let's get started. In America today, there has been a lot of debate on whether or not to raise the minimum wage. People for raising the national minimum wage have argued that it will only benefit society. On the other side, the people against raising the national minimum wage say that it will affect jobs and destroy the economy. Today, we will look at why raising the minimum wage will destroy the economy of the United States. At first, we have to describe what exactly is the minimum wage. The minimum wage was established in 1938 by President FDR. Labor unions pushed for many years to get higher wages, and by the time the Great Depression rolled around, they made it law that there was a certain price floor on what people were allowed to be paid by businesses, and this was a big impact in restarting the economy after the Great Depression. And it is important to point out that the current national minimum wage is $7.25. The intention of the minimum wage. After the Great Depression, there was a lot of instability. So by establishing a minimum wage was to provide a stable living for all individuals to keep up with the cost of living. But by the time 1960 rolled around, the minimum wage was not able to keep up with the cost of living, and that is the way that it has remained until today. The national minimum wage law in 1938 was a flawed system that President Roosevelt looked to for a quick solution. His intentions were to lead the country out of the Great Depression in a long way, but it is hard for him to foresee exactly the impact of the national minimum wage almost 100 years later. The first reason that raising the national minimum wage will hurt the economy is its impact on unemployment. Economics 101 shows that a higher minimum wage equals lower job demand. A lower job demand is going to impact unemployment and it will rise. Another reason that unemployment will be caused is from small businesses. Small businesses in America already are struggling to pay their workers. Most of them already get paid above the minimum wage of $7.25. And if you raise the minimum wage, it is going to put small businesses either out of business or they're going to have to cut staff because they will not be able to keep up with paying many workers that wage. Another reason that raising the national minimum wage will hurt the economy is it helps some at the expense of others. Raising a national minimum wage to $15, like many propose, will be detrimental. There are many people who make between $7.25 and $15 as it is. People making $15 right now are in a position where they can make a decent living as it is. It is still tough, and it is that way down to around like $12. But if you raise the minimum wage to $15, anybody who is making between $7.25 and $15 now will be at the minimum wage, which will move more people towards the poverty line. It is also important to point out that if you make $16, $17, or even $18, or you can go all the way up to $20, if you move the minimum wage up to $15, those people are not going to get a pay raise. Companies will just not be able to do it. It is not feasible. So by doing that, it's going to put more people towards the poverty line. And what you also can factor in inflation. With the price of a hamburger at McDonald's already being around $4 with a meal, it's right around $6 or $7. If you double the minimum wage, it's going to change that hamburger to $8 and that meal to $12, $14, which, as we already know, is taking a bigger chunk out of the pockets of the American people due to inflation. A last reason that it is at the expense of others is it's going to hurt business profits by a lack of ambition. If you raise the minimum wage for low income people, it is going to put less of an incentive on people who are in the higher pay raise above them because they are only being impacted in a negative way. It's going to limit their lack. It's going to limit their ambition to do their job because it's going to cast this position of what exactly am I working for? Am I really benefiting? Is this really morally right that I'm working as hard as I can and I'm not getting a pay raise as well? And that also touches back on why it's ethically wrong to impact others to help others at their expense. Another reason why raising the national minimum wage is you will be saying goodbye to businesses. It's already a fact. We've already seen it. When you raise the rates and costs of things in America, the corporations are going to head overseas to China, to Japan, to India, to countries where the cost of producing is a lot cheaper, the wage prices are a lot cheaper, and the taxes will be a lot cheaper. If you look at anybody who is in business, when it comes to producing something, they're going to go where they can produce it at the cheapest amount, where they can pay people the lowest amount for production. You can argue whether that's ethical or not, but when it comes down to it, that is what people do. Of course, most businesses would like to stay in America for as long as they can. But if you double the amount they have to pay someone, that is just going to end up leading to less American-made products. And with less American-made products, that is going to have an impact on international affairs. People aren't going to be looking to America for a lot of products that they normally do, like automobiles and other stuff like that. They're going to be looking elsewhere, which is going to hurt America amongst its international markets. So when you look at all of this, you have to think of what are the viable alternatives. The first one is to change nothing. I know that that might be alarming to some people because they think that the wage rates are an issue, but I would like to argue that it is change nothing. By changing nothing, rates among wages are going to help the economy more. As you can see, right now, the minimum wage has turned into a job for a high school student just to make a little bit of cash for their pockets to, maybe put it away for college, have a little spending money on the weekends or on a Friday night to go to a football game. It is not really meant for people to live on like the intention was, and like we touched on before, it's a flawed system. So when it comes to that, also changing nothing, most companies have realized that in order to stay competitive with the big corporations and factories, they have to pay their workers more than the minimum wage. You see small grocery stores already paying workers upwards of $10, $11. You're seeing fast food chains already paying a few dollars above the minimum wage. So as of right now, there's more people working now who are not on the minimum wage level than there was in the past. Another alternative is leaving the minimum wage rates up to individual states. The cost of living in states across the country is very different. In California, the cost of living is much higher than it is in Pennsylvania. One can argue that a minimum wage in California should be higher than it is in Pennsylvania. or Virginia or Nebraska or in Colorado compared to North Carolina. The cost of living is just different. So it is more important to leave the cost of minimum wage and the levels of it up to the individual states because that is more of their right. By adding more tasks to the federal government, it is going to hurt the economy in the country. The founding fathers intended for people to have them more governed by the states and the federal government. They wanted a small federal government and stronger state government. And when you think about raising the national minimum wage, one has to ask if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. There's too many arguments for raising the minimum wage nationally, but they don't look at the way the country was designed. That would be more of a state government decision. And I think also we can, instead of looking at raising the national minimum wage, we can address other issues like Social Security, which will be, according to many studies and economist predictions, it will, if there's not an adjustment to Social Security, it may be depleted by the calendar year 2023, which that will be very more impactful and hurting of the citizens than of changing the minimum wage. I think that changing the minimum wage across states may be more viable alternatives, but moving the national minimum wage to $15 is only going to hurt the economy. And to touch back on the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers, here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. "The issue today is the same as it has been throughout all history, whether man shall be allowed to govern himself or ruled by a small elite." The perception of the federal government in Washington, D.C. is they are of an elite. I think that that is what our country is moving towards, in a strong federal government, a larger federal government, instead of a smaller federal government with less mandates and restrictions over things. And I think that, like Jefferson is saying here, we have to govern ourselves at the state level more than we can be governed by a small elite who look to change everything that has made this country great and what it is today. That is just my thoughts on raising the minimum wage nationally. If you would like to discuss it in the comments, I highly suggest that. And once again, if you like the information that you have received today, please subscribe and I will keep on posting. Thank you.